There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Shawn Breathes Books. Welcome back to my channel and another episode of Zooming In, which is an occasional series where I engage with bookish social media luminaries the world over to discuss bookish literary articles online. And I'd like to welcome back for, I think, her third appearance on this series, Elisabeth from the fabulous BookTube channel, Bokens and Books, joining us from Ottawa. Hello, Elisabeth.
Hello, Shawn.
So nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
And we've
Thank
got
you
a
for
great...
inviting me again.
Oh, yes. I had such a backlog of these conversations taped that I didn't interview anybody new for about 6 months. I slowly got them out on my channel, but now I'm looking for some fresh input. And we are here to discuss an article from LitHub, December of last year, about rereading books. The title is Reading with My Past Self, A Year of Revisiting Books by Angela Baggetta, who is a book publicist in New York State. So we have lots to talk about, Elisabeth. Tell us about you and rereading, or any other general comments about the article.
So the one thing about the article I didn't quite get, I don't think it's mentioned, it's whether the author just reread book for the entire year or whether she focused on rereading but also read new books at the same time.
Yeah, my impression was that it was the primary focus, but perhaps not the exclusive. But
yeah. But it still makes for an interesting project, I think, to spend most of the year rereading stuff. When I was younger, when I was a teenager, I used to reread a lot. I don't know if it was because once I read a book, it required too much effort to read a new book, so I just went back to always the same one, or if I was afraid I wouldn't find as good a book if I read something else. But I tended to reread enormously. So my favorites, I read them over and over. Some of them I read every year for 10 years and more. And then I started to discover new books and I forgot about rereading. In a way, I thought it was a bit of a waste of time. But then recently I've started to reread again and the joy of rereading just came back and I love it.
That's great. It sounds like it's primarily a positive experience. Have you ever had a negative experience with rereading a favorite?
Yes. It was a Canadian author, Lucy Montgomery, author of Anne of Green Gables. When I was a teenager, I read all of her books and I loved them all. I thought they were all fabulous. And there was one in particular that I had not reread in quite a bit and I forgot. I wanted to reread it because I didn't remember it that well. It was A Tangled Web. And when I reread it, I realized how awful it was.
Very interesting. We're going to have the Montgomeryites banging down your door.
Yeah, it's a construction issue. It starts with an old lady, Aunt Becky, I think her name is, and she's just receiving all the huge family, the cousins, the third cousins, and everyone. And we just get the character introduced one by one as they enter the room. And it lasts for something like 100 pages. We just get new characters, a bit of their backstory. We don't know which one's important, which one is not. And then after that, the story focuses on just a few of them. It's just a massive info dump at the beginning. It's odd.
That's fascinating. I don't remember it, but I remember that I had it, and I can still picture, I believe it was a New Canadian Library paperback edition with orange cover. Is that the book, the same edition you had?
I read the French translation at the time.
Oh, but anyway, yes.
I did not speak English at the time, so I read the translations. But when I read it in English, and the construction issue is the same in English or in French, it's just this massive info dump at the beginning.
That's very interesting. I am a kind of casual rereader. And I have a certain there are some books that are so dear to me that I don't want to ever reread them.
Oh.
And the one would be my favorite book of all time, Do Not Say We Have Nothing by Madeleine Thien. I don't think I'll ever reread that book because I'm nervous that I won't enjoy it as much the second time. And my memories are so clear of it. My emotional connection to it is so important to me that I don't think I'll ever reread it. I may change my mind. I occasionally do change my mind. But there are other favorites where I feel like, oh my God, I'm going to get more out of it every time I reread it. And one of them, I think the best example of that is the 1980 British novel, A Month in the Country by J.R.R. Carr. I have now read it a total of 4 times, and I will just continue to read it every few years because it's just so wonderful. So it's interesting because Do Not Say We Have Nothing means a little bit more to me than A Month in the Country, but they're both very important books, and there's just a different emotional dynamic.
Yeah, I can understand that. So
And
far, I haven't refrained from rereading a favorite. So all my favorites, I've read them multiple times, so I think they are solid favorites. I don't necessarily get the same reaction when I reread them because sometimes I focus on something else, or it's not always the same emotion when I read it, but it still is good all the time.
Angela Baggetta talks about how some of the books that she has reread decades later, it's a positive experience reading it the first time as a younger woman, and now as an older woman reading it is also a very positive experience, but she experiences it very differently as an older person.
Yes. I guess we bring our baggage when we read a book. And if we've lived for an extra 10 years or 20 years, we have that amount of baggage more to bring to our reading and that much more experience to understand the characters.
I remember being gifted a copy of The Hobbit when I was probably 11 years old or something, and my aunt at the time, she was only my aunt for about 10 minutes, but she was a big reader, and she said, you should read this now, and then you should read this again maybe every 10 years, and you will always get something different out of it as you get older. So I haven't. I read it once, and that was an enjoyable experience, but probably not one I would go back to.
I had a strange experience with The Hobbit. It was when the movies, The Lord of the Rings, came out at the end of the 1990s. I decided I would read The Lord of the Rings because I had never read it and I wanted to read the book before I went to see the movie. And my brother, being older and wiser, he just told me, just read The Hobbit first. So I read The Hobbit first and I thought, I don't get it. If I would reread The Hobbit, I would picture it better now because I've seen the movie, so that gives me a mental image of what a hobbit is and a dwarf, a troll, and whatnot, but I don't think it would be dramatically a different experience.
I'm certainly not into fantasy at all. I remember enjoying The Hobbit very much, and I had the reaction you had to The Hobbit. I had that after I read about 20 pages of the first in the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Yeah.
No, I'm not really into this. It was one of my very first bails.
See, it was an important book for you too.
That's right. No, so she has taken this on as a project, as you said, focusing primarily or maybe exclusively for a year of her reading life, devoting it to rereading. Does that appeal to you? Do you think you're going to do that now that you've read about this other woman's experience?
Not this year, because I suffer from what a lot of YouTubers have, which is, well, booktubers, I should say, the ever-growing TBR, the pile of books that I buy and that I haven't read yet. I'm trying to reduce that a little bit, so I cannot reread all the time, but I'm trying to reread at least one book a month. So that would be my objective for this year, a dozen rereads.
I read maybe 2 or 3 books a year, and I
Yeah.
don't think I've reread anything this year, have I? I don't think so. Yeah, I'm attracted to the shiny new things. They don't have to be 2025 releases, although I'm very drawn to those as well. But when I've got probably thousands of unread books in my library, it's really,
Yeah,
really
I'm at 250 approximately, so
I haven't
that's well
counted.
over it. That's 2 years of reading for me.
For years, I would say that 80 to 90% of my library was unread, but I've been making up for lost time in the last 6 or 7 years. Have you ever read a book for the first time and then immediately started rereading it?
No.
That's happened to me exactly once. And that was an incredible experience. It was the Wiradjuri Australian novel, The Yield by Tara June Winch. And I just fell into that novel so deeply that I just started back on page 1 when I was done.
And the second time it was as good?
Absolutely. The first time was a buddy read, so it was spread over a month. The second reading was much longer paced. It spread over a few months, and yeah, both were very rich. I would go back to that one again, too. That one really speaks to me, so.
Once or twice I had the temptation to do that. The book was so good I wanted to reread it again, but it happened with really big books, and I didn't necessarily want to recommit again to 800 pages. Middlemarch by George Eliot. And at the end of it, I thought, there's another angle under which I could reread it now because I know what happened, so I could reread it with something in mind. But it was 800 pages, so I figured, I'll wait a bit.
Yes, that's one that I would like to reread, and that one, maybe not next, but that's one I could see reading in the next couple of years. I was about 30 when I read it, and I'm now 32, so I can't remember.
Yeah, 2 years later, it's about time.
The other thing that I think of occasionally, maybe 3 or 4 times a year, I finish a book and realize, you know what, I just didn't get it quite. I
Yeah.
didn't get everything, and that a rereading would be a good idea for that reason. And that's
Mhm.
not usually what makes me want to reread books, but sometimes it does. And do you have anything like that? Can you relate to that?
Yes, it's books that I read when I was much younger. And now I'm wondering, now that I'm older, would I get something else out of it? Would I understand it better? I'm thinking of a book that I read when I was a student. It was a Michel Houellebecq book, very famous French author. And when I read it, it was like the biggest book of the year. Everybody made a fuss about it. It was supposed to win the Goncourt Prize, but it did not. And I read it and I was just, okay, I don't get it. Again, a bit like The Hobbit. Okay, I don't get what the fuss is about. So I'm wondering now that I'm like twice the age that I was back then, would I have a different perspective on the book? Or would it still just be just well, not for me? I don't
In this case, I will make an intervention and say, don't waste your time on that
not
ball.
on that one.
I've never read him, but just everything I've heard about him, he just God, I'd rather stick pins in my eyes than try a book by him.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. I wonder, should I give him a second chance, either by rereading the book that's supposed to be his best, or just dropping it and just accepting that Welbeck is not for me? Yeah.
And are you a bailer? Do you ever bail on books?
Not intentionally. If I don't
Unintentionally?
finish a book within 3 weeks, it tends just to stay there and I don't go back to it. I'm attracted by the shiny new stuff. Um,
Okay. And if it falls behind the reading table and you just, it's a unconscious bail, is
yeah.
it ever be, I'm assuming that those books are the ones you're not particularly enjoying, or you'd be picking them up every day.
I pick them up again after that. Sometimes I pick them up just right where I was, like where the bookmark is, and I just continue. Or other times I just go back from the beginning, depending on how long I've read. Sometimes it's just a matter of timing. If I've read too many of the same types of books in a row, and then, okay, it's the third one, I'm not going to read that. Or sometimes it's just circumstances, something happens that makes it, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Sometimes when I give a negative review of a book that I finished, or I bail on a book that is quite universally loved, and I get a lot of pushback. Why? What's wrong with you? It was such a wonderful book, but you should try it again. And those kind of go on a special list, a mental list in my head. Maybe if everybody loved it but me, should I try it again? Maybe,
Yeah.
but it's not a top priority reread for me.
It was with Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. The first time I read it, I was disappointed. I don't know what I was expecting, but I was disappointed. I think the romance was not particularly satisfying. And then when I reread it, I read it as a comedy, and it was so funny. And I enjoyed it a lot more as a comedy than as a romance.
Yes, I often miss humor on the page if I don't hear it read aloud to me, or yeah, so I've been gone to author readings and thought, oh my God, I think I've completely missed the point of her writing. She's actually
Yeah.
very funny. There's a certain kind of humor that really lands for me, and it doesn't matter, and I'll pick it up right away in the text. But there's other kinds of humors that I think just pass me by unless I hear it read aloud or somebody says, well, it was a really funny book, Shawn. Really? Okay. I guess I need to reread it. She talks about a few experiences she had this year where her rereading was tainted by news about the author, scandals or crimes or whatever. Has that ever happened to you?
I
Learn
cannot
the
say
author.
that I'm reading particularly controversial authors, I think. The one time I was a bit puzzled, I bought an Anne Perry book. And the person behind, after I had paid for it, she told me, "Oh, do you know that she actually killed someone when she was a teenager?" I was,
Her
"What?"
mother. Oh no, her friend's mother. That
Exactly. And suddenly I didn't, do I want to read the book or not? And yeah, I decided to read the book anyway because I figured she was a teenager. She received her sentence. And if I believe in rehabilitation, then I have to give her another chance. So I'm not going to condemn her for that. Though
I
it
have
was a
seen the
bit
movie.
odd that she earned a living writing murder mysteries. If she had been writing
Absolutely.
romance, wouldn't be an issue.
I saw the movie. There was a docudrama or whatever about that that it was disturbing to watch. I guess the elephant in the room while we're talking about this is Alice Munro. Or have you been a fan of Alice Munro's short stories?
No, I've read only one collection of short stories
Okay.
of Alice Munro.
Yeah,
But yeah, it is something difficult to deal with.
I'm going to be doing a group chat about this topic later, whenever it's not scheduled. But yeah, at first, when the scandalous news broke, I was crushed and I thought, no, I can't ever read her again or reread her. And I'm now kind of in a little bit different place. I think I will continue to read her. I'm not
Mhm.
going to throw all my Alice Munros into the trash like I thought for the first month, but I will read her differently. So should you and I buddy read The Hobbit, Elizabeth?
Maybe not. That would surprise both of our viewers, but not both of our viewers. We have more than 2 viewers, but the viewers
I
of
hope we
both of
do.
our channels.
That's right. Absolutely. Or what would be another one? Shall we reread 50 Shades of Grey together, Elizabeth?
That would be a smash on book 2.
That would be a smack on both of our backsides from what I've heard about that book. Of course, I haven't
Yes,
read it, and I don't think
me
probably
neither.
you have either. On that
No,
happy note, what a lovely chat as always, Elizabeth. Thank you so much.
you're very welcome. Thank you again.